It's time, y'all. Let's talk about court cards. Whenever I ask people what their hangups are around tarot, what their challenges are around tarot, the answer is 9 times out of 10 court cards. It's not even close. Everyone always wants to talk about court cards. And I think part of that is because the ways that we often talk about this section of the tarot is as people. Obviously, often they're portrayed as people in terms of the images on the deck, but we also often talk about these cards when they show up in readings as representing a person that is already in our life, that is going to enter our life, or that is going to exit our life. And look, sometimes that interpretation makes sense, especially if you're doing a reading that includes thinking about other people, some kind of relationship reading or, a career reading where you're working with other people. Sometimes it makes sense. But if that's your main definition for court cards and you often find yourself getting caught up trying to figure out who that person is, I would invite you gently to perhaps leave that definition behind. I think if you don't immediately recognize that card as standing for someone specific, then it's probably talking about something else. Court cards are archetypes. Just like the major arcana, court cards can represent an energy that we want to step into, a kind of movement that we want to embrace or perhaps that we have too much of. Court cards really can represent a facet of self or a facet of another person, but they can really speak to a moment in time or a section of the cycle that we're currently in. If reading court cards as other people doesn't work for you, stop doing it. We're getting into court cards today, so let's talk about pages. Pages are generally referred to as the youngest member of the suit, but you can also think about them as students, as beginners, as interns, if that's helpful. Some people like to talk about them as children or having a childlike energy, but I really like the beginner or seeker kind of keyword for this card. When I think about pages, I think about curiosity and open-mindedness. I think about fresh approaches, being willing to take risks, and not feeling constrained by the rules or the ways that certain things have been done before. Pages for me are really about being willing to engage with something in a way that is unexpected, right? They're curious. They want to understand, they want to learn, they want to play and experiment. They're not afraid to rebel or to do something in their own way. It's really all about stepping into a new journey or a new unknown something, whether it's a topic or an adventure or just a course of study or discovery, and being willing to do so in a way that it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. They're going to do their own thing. It's kind of fool energy, honestly, in that way. I see pages as the 11th card of their suit, so following the pip cards, which means that pages are associated with the energy of 2 for me. I think of them as these really observant, dualistic perspective cards, where they are willing to try new things and really consider what is going to feel the most authentic for them. Whatever choices they make, it's going to be based on what matters to them, what they desire, what they want, and what they need. I hope that helps a little bit. All right, let's talk about knights in the tarot. Knights are often described as the adolescents of the tarot, or of the tarot court, that is. And you can think about them like adventurers, or like creators, or like seekers. Knights really want to prove themselves. They're out to get something done. They want to make something new. They want to make a difference. They want to make an impression. Even if that includes burning everything down, knights want to be seen, and they want their impact to be felt. I often talk about knights as showing up in readings to teach us about balance, whether or not we have too much or too little of an element. And I think that actually comes into play in the numerology of knights. I see these as the 12th card of their suit, which puts them into the 3 category. And with 3s, we're really looking at Empress energy, right? We're looking at outpourings, we're looking at creativity, we're looking at collaboration, but we're also looking at this desire to be seen, to have our work be witnessed, and to have our impact be felt. Knights can be focused or frazzled depending on which element we're talking about, but when a knight is in a reading or when a knight comes into play, I think they're really pushing us to consider how we're showing up in the world and what kind of engagement and recognition we want. What are we trying to create? What are we trying to prove? What are we trying to achieve? What boundaries are we pushing? And how do we want our skills or our talents or our abilities or our accomplishments to be recognized and celebrated, not just internally, but also by people around us? Where are we craving validation? All right, we've discussed the younger members of the court, right? We've talked about pages and we talked about knights, but now we're going to talk about the rulers of the court. These are the masters of their element. These are the people who know what the fuck they're doing. And let's start with talking about queens. When I think about queens, I am really thinking about people who are deeply engaged in their communities in like a one-to-one, personal, everyday kind of level. So I'm thinking about artists, I'm thinking about teachers, I'm thinking about mentors, and I'm thinking about guardians or protectors. I tend to think of queens as people who are willing to get their hands dirty and put in the daily effort to make something happen, not just for themselves, but also for the people around them. These are the people that are investing in community on a regular basis. For me, queens are expressive and know exactly who the fuck they are, but they're also really willing to be honest. They don't mind doing the hard things or putting in the hard work to make something possible and to ensure that something is going to last. There's a warmth to queens that I think is really important to remember, especially when we consider that numerologically, I see them falling into the 4 constellation because I view them as the 13th card of their suit. And the Emperor, Death constellation can be a little bit tricky for people. But if we think about it as protection, if we think about it as stewardship, if we think about it as guarding the things that really matter and being willing to protect and fight for the things that we care about, it takes on a different tone. You might prefer to associate queens with the Empress energy, but I really like queens as emperors because I think that they are really committed to protecting beauty and art and power and magic. We've made it to the kings of the court, and if you've been reading tarot for a while, you might sometimes struggle to differentiate between queen energy and king energy when we're talking about court cards. So let's talk about the tarot kings. Kings are also rulers of the court, and they're also community leaders. But where I see queens as kind of being in the trenches, getting their hands dirty, being willing to put in kind of the daily work to make things happen, I see kings as more forward-thinking, legacy-oriented, like future-concerned people. These are the architects, these are the trailblazers, these are the path makers. If queens are like on the ground, kings are soaring overhead. I really see kings as thinking, again, about like legacy, about how things are going to evolve over time. These are people that are going to be making changes that are going to impact not just the here and now, but also future generations. So kings really have an eye for what's going to cause change, how that change will have ripple effects on the different people around them, and really feels the weight of responsibility for ensuring that the world is hopefully better than they left it. Kings might feel a little bit colder than queens because they're a little bit more distant or separate, but I think that kings still really have the capacity to be incredibly creative, compassionate, and connected to people. If kings are the 14th card of their suit, that puts them into the 5 constellation, which means that kings live in that messy middle, that pivot point. They're always thinking about what direction we're going to be moving in and are very conscious about how the choices that they make are going to impact the long term.